Yes, we are live now. Please start.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ashwin, and I work with an organization called Nature Conservation Foundation, with our primary objective being to encourage people to watch and document nature, so that we create these big, amazing databases that can produce amazing scientific insights. So I will just share my screen. Yes, so my talk will be about big data and biodiversity. Before starting, I want all of you to look long and hard at this bird on the screen now. This is the house sparrow, something that's very close to all of our hearts. A bird that I suppose most people in the country have heard of in some way. And I want you to think about what you know about this bird. Um, is it doing fine? Is there something that you've heard in the news? Is there something that you believe about this bird at the moment? So, progress in general biodiversity science has been a little slow and limited because there's been limited data. And why has there been limited data historically? Because you just have a handful of scientists around the world collecting data and producing wonderful science, but still limited by the number of individuals who can participate in this uh, project, in a sense. But there is a big opportunity because observing the natural world is a very popular hobby. It's not just limited to scientists. There are certain aspects of science where the general public is perhaps not interested or doesn't necessarily have the training to participate in. But biodiversity science is not that. So you might know people around you who watch birds. There are many people who are interested in snakes and lizards and watch beetles, butterflies. And while watching all of this around us, while people watch all of this, there is a lot of knowledge that is privately gained. You try and identify it, you notice where it is, at what point of time, date, and location, etc. And we keep all this knowledge within ourselves. How can we aggregate this private data into a public scientific database? So this is the opportunity, moving from a small amount of data collected by some scientists to something which practically every individual in the world can participate in, and aggregate this data to produce something that is truly fantastic. I'll give you an example of the sort of data that you can probably collect. For many of you might have had snakes entering your houses at some point, and you call these snake catchers to come and rescue them. And what is happening in that case? You have information about a particular organism inside your house at some point of time. Now, what if you could contribute this to a larger database? So this is where citizen science platforms have made a big wave recently, and I'll talk about two particular ones: eBird and iNaturalist. eBird is meant for birds, meant for observations of birds, where anybody in the world can make checklists of birds and upload them to this platform. iNaturalist is meant for all organisms. Uh, so many other organisms don't have the concept of a checklist, and therefore it is iNaturalist is photo based. You upload a photograph, it goes into a public database, and there is some form of data quality control, which I will get to next. But this is what a checklist on eBird looks like. You have a date stamp, you have a GPS location, you have stamp in space. You then have all the species that you have seen, all the bird species that you have seen, and the numbers. And you also have the option to upload media, which is photos, audio, videos, etc. And it has this amazing additional supporting feature of a map. So your track is tracked by the app, and therefore you can finally see on Google Maps where you have been. So this is, for example, what I have been able to upload on eBird so far. A large number of checklists, a large number of photographs, and so many species. And if thousands of people upload their knowledge in this form, what can we get? So in India, people began uploading bird checklists to eBird in 2014, not so far back, but there's been immense growth now. What you see in front of you here is not technically the political map of India, but actually the map of all locations from where at least one eBird checklist has been uploaded in India. And if you see it, it neatly forms the political boundary of the country. So there have been 24 million observations so far uploaded to eBird, 1.5 million checklists and more, 24,000 observers, and all species that have been recorded in India so far, which is 1,341. And this, remember, is only for India alone. As you saw on my checklist, there's also media, there's also photo, audio, etc. that's uploaded. And here you see that this is for the world. So eBird is a global database, so is iNaturalist. So eBird, there have been over 28 million photographs uploaded to the database, over 1 million audio recordings, and almost 200,000 videos. And this is a phenomenal database to understand more about birds. And iNaturalist, there have been 72 million observations uploaded on iNaturalist from all over the world. These squares that you see on the map are all the places from where, all the general areas from where at least some observations have been uploaded. And you see the whole of India is filled. Practically the whole of the world is filled except some parts of the Sahara Desert in Africa. And these databases, these citizen science databases and platforms give us amazing new opportunities to understand the natural world around us. But before I go to how these databases have helped and are helping, I think it's important to talk about how data quality is maintained. In such big databases, there has to be some mechanism to ensure that the data is authentic to an extent. So the way that data quality is maintained is different on these two platforms. So eBird is checklist based. You don't necessarily need a photo associated with every observation. iNaturalist requires a photo for every observation. So the difference in eBird is that there's a network of data quality editors, of experts and reviewers who set filters in such a way that anything that is uncommon in space and time in a particular place will be flagged and then looked at by the volunteer editors. iNaturalist works on a community validation mechanism where if you put up a photo of an organism, then anybody else on the iNaturalist community can come and say, okay, I agree with this identification, or okay, I don't agree with this identification and this is something else. And if a number of people agree on a particular identification, it becomes what is called research grade. So now as scientists, if you want to download that information, if you want to download this public data, both eBird and iNaturalist, the data is public for anybody in the world to access. So if you download that data, then you will get only research quality data. So how have these data sets advanced our knowledge? So there are effectively 4 ways now. We have updated and amazing information now on where different organisms are found and when. We can learn about migration, which is a really fascinating phenomenon. We can learn about population trends. And why are population trends so important? Unless you know how a particular organism is doing or how a group of organisms are doing, you cannot actually put forth any measures, any conservation measures to be able to conserve them or to be able to ensure that we continue to experience their beauty into the future. And then finally, there are photos, audio, and machine learning. How can we use these photos and audio to be able to develop algorithms to help us say better identify animals, to be able to better pick out mistakes in these databases, etc. So distributions, when and where organisms are found. So this is entirely from the eBird database. You can correlate records of species in time, uh, species with time, with environmental covariates, with elevation, temperature, etc., with habitat, with the forest type or the habitat type they're in, and you can get these wonderful maps of where the species is expected to be at different times of the year. So this is a bird called Blythe's reed warbler. Many of you may not know this, but you spend about half the year in very close proximity with this bird. During winter, it makes a chuck chuck sound. It's a brown bird, and it lives in almost most of our gardens in India in the peninsula. But if you see, the species only spends the winter in India, but its entire breeding period is spent way north in the temperate and taiga parts of the of Eurasia. So you see it breeds in an area, the red part, it passes through the yellow area, and it spends the winter in India. So for a bird that is found over such a large part of the world during the breeding season, us in India and the Indian subcontinent are custodians of the species during winter. But this is knowledge we get from this database. And as you might, and it's probably not very surprising to imagine that many of these areas which are represented on this map have not been visited by scientists. So this is the Blythe's reed warbler. It's a small brown bird. Indian blue robin. This is a bird that's found only in the Indian subcontinent and the Himalayas, adjacent to it, parts of China, Myanmar, etc. And this bird spends the winter in the Western Ghats, although it breeds in the Himalayas. So you see where in peninsular India this bird is likely to be found, where it passes through. So that's parts of Northeast India, West Bengal, Bangladesh, etc. It moves through, and then it eventually goes to the Himalayas to breed. So in the summer, it's in the Himalayas. In the winter, it's in the Western Ghats. Migration. We did mention migration here, these birds that move between different areas during different parts of the year, but you can visualize migration. You can see migration in action from these databases. So this is an really enigmatic and charismatic species called Amur falcon, which has been in the news recently because there's been a very heartwarming successful conservation story in Northeast India, where people now protect the birds. There are hundreds of thousands of birds that pass through that are seen in parts of Northeast India while they migrate between the Amur regions of China and Russia and Africa. So this bird passes through India every year, both in October, November, December, and again in April, May, and June. Passes through India, but it neither breeds in India nor does it spend the winter in India. So you get to visualize this migration. And this is from point locations of all observations of the species across the world. Bar-headed goose. Bar-headed goose is famous for being the highest flying bird, one of the highest flying birds in the world, where they cross the highest parts of the Himalayas and move between the Tibetan Plateau and the Indian Peninsula. And then population trends. How can we understand population trends from the eBird dataset? Because you have observations uploaded in the form of checklists. There is a metric called reporting frequency, which you can estimate from this. So let me give you an example. If somebody uploads 5 checklists from an area, and you're looking at how frequently a particular species is reported. Let's think about house sparrow. House sparrow, which is species A, is reported in all 5 out of 5 checklists. Whereas something less common, a bar-headed goose, species C, is reported only in 2 out of 5 checklists. So now what can you say? Species C, or bar-headed goose, is reported less frequently than species A. And this you can get from such a from a data set with multiple checklists. Now, how can you look at the population trend of a given species? If you follow the reporting frequency over time, house sparrow in 1995 was reported in 5 out of 5 checklists, whereas house sparrow in 2005 was reported only in 2 out of 5 checklists, which means its frequency of reporting has gone down from 100% to 40%, which indicates a decline. So using this concept, you can estimate population trends for species. But eBird data or any citizen science data is not systematically collected. So there have to be mechanisms in place to be able to correct for that, or at least minimize or reduce biases that arise from this non-systematic sampling. What do I mean by non-systematic sampling? if I make a checklist for 5 hours, somebody else might make a checklist for just 1 hour or 2 hours. How are these comparable? Many people might make checklists or watch birds in Bangalore, but this might not be the same in some rural area near Bangalore. So you need a way to be able to reduce these biases. So what do? So you have you look at these relationships between reporting frequency and birding effort, and you try and standardize to a checklist of average effort. Similarly, you try and standardize to a checklist of average season, and you try and standardize across space. So then what do you get? You get some form of corrected frequency of reporting, which then helps us get at these trends. Now, a question that all of you might have is eBird data. People started uploading to eBird only in 2014. How is it that we're able to look at before 2000 and years that are way in the past? This is because birdwatchers have this amazing habit of keeping notes. So many birdwatchers have gone back to their trunks and trunks of notes where they've maintained where they've diligently maintained checklists for the past 20 years, 30 years, etc. And some people have even posthumously, people have been able to access their notes, which although the people, birdwatchers themselves are no longer alive. And all of these notes, many of these notes have been uploaded and now entered in the database. So there is this long-term data set that has been created, not just something in the past 7-8 years in India, but for the past, say 60 or 70 years, the earliest checklist being from the 1960s. So now I want to take you back to that question I asked you in the beginning about house sparrow. We all thought that certain things were happening with house sparrow. Let's say that the popular narrative in the media was that house sparrows were declining because of mobile tower radiation, or that house sparrows are not being seen anywhere at all nowadays. They've declined considerably. So there have been these narratives around. So much so that there have been house sparrow breeding centers that have been set up in some parts of the country. I think in parts of Haryana, maybe some other areas, there have been house sparrow breeding centers set up. But remember that we did not have the data to really assess this in the past. What does the data really say? Now, when we actually got this big data set and a bunch of organizations came together to analyze it, we found that house sparrows have actually been stable over the long term. In the country as a whole, house sparrows are doing perfectly fine. So there's absolutely no need for us to worry about this really likable bird. Maybe we need to prioritize on other species. House sparrows are not the sort of birds that require breeding centers. House sparrows are not the sort of birds that require unscientific theories like mobile tower radiation, etc., which have no evidence at all today. So the data says that house sparrows have not declined in the country as a whole. And the reasons for decline are unfounded. Some other species, although unfortunately, have declined. This beautiful bird of prey called the red-necked falcon has declined by over 50% in the last 25 years, which is a cause for concern. Ashiprinia, a bird that is found in many of our gardens across the peninsula, and is a bird that adapts very well to any form of degradation or any form of habitat change, has increased manyfold in the last 25 years. And this is probably because this bird is highly adaptable to human habitats. But was all the worry about house sparrows completely unfounded? No, because house sparrows have indeed declined by more than 25% in the cities. So we now have the potential to look at rural areas separately from the cities. Although they've been doing really well in rural areas, they have indeed declined in the cities. What you see, the green line is across the entire country. The orangish line is in metropolitan cities alone. Right? So house sparrows do require some focus in the metropolitan cities because we all want to continue to see this bird around our houses. And this is the power of data. It helps inform these decisions and helps take decisions that will actually benefit our the goals that we have in mind. So what you saw there was a snippet of this report that was put together by a consortium of organizations, 10 organizations around the country. that work on wildlife that downloaded this data contributed by thousands of birdwatchers around the country and came up with the first State of India's Birds report for the country, which helps inform and prioritize conservation decisions related to birds in the country. So 867 species of birds were looked at. And these organizations, which I mentioned on top here, have categorized all birds into species of high, moderate, and low concern. High concern birds being the ones that require focus, and this includes birds like the red-necked falcon. So finally, what may interest a lot of you are photos and audio. How can we learn from that? And how can machine learning algorithms help us as bird watchers and as citizens? So what you have here, what you see here is an app called Merlin. So this app, Merlin, has been developed by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, which also maintains eBird. And this is based entirely on observations of birds contributed by bird watchers around the world. Observations of birds as well as photographs and audio. So you see an option that says explore birds. So if you go to explore birds, you will see a list of birds based on the packs you have installed on this software. But if you go and you say, I want to look at likely birds for Bangalore today. So I live in Bangalore. So let's say I want to know something about birds in Bangalore. What am I likely to see? Say I want to understand what's around me. I look at likely birds for Bangalore today, and then I get an entirely different set of birds organized in descending order of how likely they are given the data uploaded for that region. Remember, we spoke about frequency of reporting, how likely they are based on that, on the data for your area for today, for a window around today. So I know that if I step out of my house, the most likely bird for me to see is the large-billed crow, followed by Asian quail. Asian quail, you all know it sings. It's really well known in Indian culture. But the Asian quail mostly sings only during some part of the year. During another part of the year, Asian quail may not figure in this list at all. When it is not calling out to its mates, an Asian quail is not likely to be seen so often. Therefore, if you look at the data for maybe November or December, Asian quail may not figure in this at all. So this is a great tool to inform anyone about what they're likely to have around their houses. But now we go to photographs. You see there's an option that says photo ID. And then you can choose a photo. So I am choosing a photo of this bird, a photograph that was taken by a friend of mine in Mohit Shenoy in Chitradurga in Karnataka. So Chitradurga is a place that is in central Karnataka, somewhat dry, not so well birded. But I've taken this photo and I put it here. I choose the area and I choose the date. And then it gives me the ID. So you all may have used Google Lens. So this is say a more efficient version, which is based entirely on birds. So this is only for birds. So you put it in Rufous fronted prinia, a bird that many people haven't heard of at all, which is rare in the area, as the app tells you, but that photo is likely of a Rufous fronted prinia. Of course, this app that is built on machine learning is not of course 100% correct, so it gives likely options. You have Rufous fronted prinia followed by jungle prinia followed by some other birds, but it tells you what it's likely to be. So as a photographer who takes photos, as we increasingly have a large community of people who like taking photographs of nature but want to know more about this nature, what have they photographed, you can use a tool like Merlin to be able to find out more about what you have photographed. Use the app, upload it there, and it will tell you what the likely birds are. And of course, this app, eBird, iNaturalist, all of these citizen science apps are free to use. But incredibly, recent and phenomenal advancement has been a tool to be able to recognize a bird through its sound. So this is Merlin audio. So you have sound ID. It does not cover birds in India yet, but soon If you hear some bird making a sound outside your house, you can record it, you can upload it onto this platform, and you can find out what the bird was. So this is now iNaturalist. So I don't want to only talk about birds. iNaturalist is something that that all of you can participate in this project. And as I mentioned earlier, you take a photo of any organism and you can upload it on iNaturalist. You just have to go to so this is what I have uploaded so far on iNaturalist. But you go to the you have the app. You can upload a new observation, choose an image. Here I'm choosing the image of a scorpion I saw near my house recently. So this scorpion is, I don't know, let's say I don't know what this scorpion is. Taken this photo, I want to upload it. So I put it on the app. It automatically takes information about date, location, etc. And now I have, I don't know what I saw. What do I do here? So if I click on what did you see, again, iNaturalist has a built-in identification tool that's based on machine learning that will give you some ideas on what this animal might be, what this organism might be. So here it suggests that this is an Asian forest scorpion of a particular genus. The genus is Heterometrus, which it indeed is. I don't know what more it is. So for now, I will click on Asian forest scorpion and I will upload this observation. This tool also helps you compare with photos that are already uploaded on the platform. So I have my photo on top and I have a bunch of photos of the species below, and I try and see, do they look similar? I can compare them to other organisms and see whether those look similar. So I think it's time to come to a big question now. I've spoken about all of this. I've spoken about this immense opportunity to collect huge data sets and do so much. I've only discussed the tip of the iceberg here, what can be done with this data and what has been done with this data so far. But why is it so important to understand the natural world? Why is this such an important project, I think, for human society? That's because the natural world plays an integral role in our lives. You may have read a lot about it recently during what we have gone through in the last couple of years now. The natural world has many, there are, for example, trees, they store carbon, they reduce the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, they bring precipitation. There are organisms that, if we do not understand well, can facilitate the spread of diseases. We need to understand where certain organisms, say like snakes, are in our lives in cities, so that we're able to develop mechanisms to be able to deal with this. What if you have a cobra in the house? Where are cobras likely to be in houses in Bangalore? So I get some cobras in my house regularly in my part of town, and there are many people around me that get it. But I know from both these databases and from my personal observation that this is a likely scenario here. So I've kept the numbers of snake catchers on my phone so that whenever a snake comes into my house, I call people who are experts at this, and they come, rescue the snake, and release it in an area which is suitable for that animal and away from immediate where humans are, away from immediate danger. So these are some small examples of how this can help. Generally, in understanding the natural world, in understanding pollinators, in understanding where insects are present in good numbers, where our crops can do well, where the next locust invasion might come, where is it coming from? So citizen science, technology, and the emergence of big data is playing a very, very crucial role. So all of you can get involved. You may not be able to get involved immediately with, say, the bird project or uploading checklists on eBird yet, because that requires you to be a bird watcher and be interested in doing that. But all of us love nature in some way. All of us observe nature around us, whether it's a frog or some spider in the house, something that we're scared of, maybe a rat that has come into our house. All of this is data, and all of this can be uploaded on iNaturalist assuming you take a photograph. I suggest that all of you download this app and check out its potential. It also helps you document everything that you have around your house, and it's like a private notebook as well. Also download Merlin, the app, which is free, which can really help you get started with understanding the birds around you. I suggest all of you download that app. Visit birdcount.in. Bird Count India is a group that I work with. The primary objective, as I said, is to encourage people to document and observe the birds around them, and generate knowledge based on the data that's uploaded. So visit birdcount.in. It has some really good resources for starting bird watchers. And visit stateofindiasbirds.in, which is the report that I spoke of during the talk. And it has the trends and range sizes and conservation categorization for 867 species of Indian birds. And visit eBird.org. Even if you do not want to upload checklists at the moment, you are not a bird watcher yet, visit the website so that you can explore and understand more about birds. I also suggest you join the Flock, which is a newsletter that brings information about birds right to your inboxes. You can use the QR code here to join and be a part of this exchange about information about birds. So that is my talk for now. I wanted to keep as much time as possible for questions, and if anyone is interested, I can show a number of other visualizations that you might find interesting. So I'll take questions. So I see a number of comments. So actually, you ask a very, very interesting question about where birds might, about how can birds predict climate? How can we find out what's happening with climate? So I will just show you something now. Give me a second. So this question is by Harsh Zala, and let me just share my screen. Yes, so I hope you can all see my screen. Another output, something else that was found in the State of India's Birds report is that migratory shorebirds, birds that live near water, that migrate all the way from the Arctic, have declined much more than birds that are either resident in India or similar birds that come from closer by, maybe come from temperate areas, etc., maybe not so far. So why might this be the case? So this, as the question suggests, let me repeat it. So this question was about how climate plays a role in influencing bird populations, and how can birds and other organisms adapt to climate change, because it's such a fast phenomenon. Some things are changing so fast. How can these organisms adapt? So let me show you a small a small set of slides to show you why this is happening. So why are birds that are coming all the way from the Arctic at greater threat than birds that are nearby? So in regions that are far away, you have climate playing a much bigger role. So let's say these are migratory birds. They migrate from the Arctic all the way to India. So when these birds go up to the Arctic during their breeding season, usually what the normal set of events was that they would go there, maybe say in March or April. They would go and breed, lay a nest, lay eggs. The eggs would hatch, and then you'd have the eggs hatching at exactly the time when the most insects have come out, when the most food is available. Now, you all might have seen around your houses that there are some times of the year, for example, near the monsoon, where there are most mosquitoes that are available. So, a bird that feeds mostly on mosquitoes has to time its breeding such that when the chicks come out, they have a lot of food to eat. And if that timing is slightly off, it means that the chicks are going to go hungry. So this is what it was supposed to be. The chicks come out, eat these mosquitoes, then they grow up to be big, healthy birds who again make this big migratory journey back all the way from the Arctic down to India. Now, what happens with climate change? You have this entire period shifting. You might have seen this in your everyday lives. February, which used to be a reasonably cold month in many parts of India, has now become quite hot. What does this all mean for birds? What does this mean for birds in the Arctic? In the Arctic, it means that the ice is going to melt faster. So, what does that mean? Now, the birds go at the same time. These birds have huge and long journeys to undertake. They cannot change the time where they go with so much ease. So, let's say they go at around the same time in March or April. What has happened now? The ice has melted, the conditions have become perfect for insects. All the insects have come out before the chicks hatch. And now the chicks actually need to grow up strong. The peak availability of insects has already shifted. So this is a phenomenon that has been documented in many parts of the Arctic. And this is something we need to really work to understanding. How can such huge consequences of climate change on birds around us be mitigated? So these birds come out, become smaller, and therefore their likelihood of survival decreases. And as citizen scientists, you or I, we cannot mitigate this problem very easily. It's a huge problem. But what we can do is we can monitor this problem. We can find out which birds are doing well, which birds are not doing well. As of now, thanks to both scientific studies and by scientists and by citizen scientists, we have an idea that Arctic birds are the most threatened. Therefore, we know where to focus our action. We need to find out how best to mitigate this decline and these effects of climate change on birds that breed in areas that are covered with snow during other parts of the year. Let me take more questions. So someone has asked whether they can come in the line of big data biodiversity. Yes, everybody can. All you need to do is learn some statistics, learn how to handle data, and download these big data sets and start playing around. You can contact people. There were some website links that I gave. You can contact people there. You can try and understand the data better, because of course it is a big data set that's publicly available, but it might take some effort to be able to understand it. And maybe you can download that data set and play around and see what you can extract from it. How could we save our environment during big data? So that's a very big question. It's a very tough question. I think the first step to saving our environment is for all of us to be aware of it and appreciate it. And that is where participating in these projects can really help your development into somebody who maybe has all of this nature at the periphery of your lives to somebody who has it right in your lives, where you're observing and appreciating everything that you have around you, and therefore contributing this knowledge of what you see around you, and therefore building a database that can help take decisions better. Saving our environment can come from two factors. One is all of us wanting to save our environment, which is the first step. And the second step is having the necessary information and knowledge to be able to save our environment. So participating in citizen science initiatives can help bridge both of these gaps. So I suggest that at least iNaturalist, download the tool, start uploading information that you have around you, start taking photos of all the small organisms around you, and you'll be one step closer to helping save your environment. So there's another question. Since you work with data, I would really like to know how to approach organizations for internships as data analysts, so as to get experience regarding data and biodiversity and conservation issues. Most of these groups, both eBird, iNaturalist, Bird Count India, many conservation groups are on social media now. You can if not through websites, to the websites that I mentioned, you can reach out to all of these groups on social media. So I suggest searching for groups like Bird Count India, even the other conservation organizations around the country like BNHS, Bombay Naturalist Society, World Wildlife Fund. All of these organizations have now presences on social media. So I suggest you reach out to these groups on Facebook or Twitter or even Instagram, and I can guarantee that you will get a response, and you will be able to connect with people who want to who will take this forward with you. Um, can we think of okay how to stop certain birds from excessive concentration in a particular place? Okay, I get your question. So this is, I suppose, mostly about pigeons. Prakash Javadekar released a problem statement on how to prevent birds dropping soils near parliament areas. This is a very good question. So birds like pigeons have now become extremely abundant in some human areas. And there are some of this is to do with the fact that pigeons are very, very adaptable. If you have a human structure, if you have any kind of, if you completely change the natural environment around you and build buildings, every other bird might find it difficult, but pigeons will come and establish there. So now, how do you stop so many pigeons from being in a particular area? So one of the best ways is to maybe stop feeding pigeons, maybe stop facilitating the excessive presence of that bird. So some of the State of India's birds research has also said that this bird has increased by more than 100%, close to 200% the last 25 years. And this cannot be healthy. It's difficult to understand what the effects are entirely. Some people are researching that. But even if not for humans, this is a problem for other birds that might want to live in these areas. So we might want to stop things that we are doing that are increasing numbers of these birds. For example, like feeding them. Feeding these birds can also lead to diseases coming in proximity with humans. As we know, there are various diseases that birds can carry, including bird flu, that are problematic for humans. In general, this is not a problem at all with all the birds that we have around us. But when certain birds become extremely common, extremely abundant in a particular area, like pigeons, this can be a problem. So I suggest stop feeding birds like pigeons because it can cause some of these diseases to come in contact or close proximity with humans. Somebody has asked, how do birds survive the rain and storms? So in most cases, birds take shelter. This is not directly related to the lecture, but birds, whenever there's a rain or a storm, they tend to take cover. They go under leaves, they go under ledges, birds that live in cities. But you'll be surprised to learn that a number of birds also die during storms. They die because um, when there are thunderstorms, when there's very heavy rain, you sometimes find large numbers of birds dead. So that can also happen. So they don't always survive, but they take the best action that they can to be able to survive. Are there any other questions? Are there? Let me check. So if there are no other questions, should we stop here?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, you can give a concluding remarks and we can close with that.
Yeah. So thank you all for listening in. I hope you found this lecture useful. Feel free to reach out to any of us if you want to participate. If you have more questions, you can reach out to Bird Count India on Facebook, on Twitter. You can reach out to any of the organizations that I mentioned. And my general advice to all of you will be to observe the natural world around you, become aware of the natural world around you, of what is happening, because as in the near future or in the long-term future, the natural world is going to play an extremely important role in our lives. And it's really important that we understand it as much as possible. And each one of us can play a role in growing that understanding. So thank you everyone for listening.
Yeah, thanks.